Hello, and welcome to the When Depression is in Your Bed podcast. We take a compassionate, judgment-free, and destigmatizing approach to talking about how depression affects individuals and relationships. I'm Trish Sanders, your host. In addition to being a licensed clinical social worker and certified relationship therapist, both my husband and I have lived with depression for most of our lives. Through my experiences, I have learned so much about what can support wellness, connection, better communication, living a more joyful life, and of course, having better relationships. And I'm so excited to share it all with you. In today's episode, the very first full episode, I will share some of my story and what led me to come on this podcast journey. I talk about how I got to a place in my life in which I declared that struggle is so last year, and how I moved from there to a place of deep healing and growth. I also acknowledge how my identities, power, and privilege impact my perspective, and at the same time, how regardless of anyone's identity, I believe healing, growth, and wellness needs to be accessible to all, and I hope to support making that more of a reality. Let's get started. As I've been on this path of beginning to create this podcast, several people have asked me why I decided to do it. Why would I choose to share intimate, often painful, very emotional details of my life with anybody who wants to listen? Well, for me, the answer is really clear, and I wanted to start off by sharing with you how I got here. So, when I was a teenager, I remember my therapist asking me when was the last time that I recalled sort of having a generally happy life, overall feeling satisfied. And I told her second grade. And it's not like everything in my world was terrible. It definitely wasn't, but I'm human, and so I definitely had challenges, of course. But it was an internal experience for me. I just felt what most people would consider and call or diagnose as depressed a lot of the time. And a lot has happened in my life since then. I've had many wonderful experiences. I have beautiful kids and a wonderful practice. I've been with my husband for 20 years, and I have great friends in my life and family that loves me. But the presence of depression in my life has been pretty much a constant. And so that length of struggle, that depth of struggle for so long, it's really become an identity for me. So it's not just like, oh, my life is a mess or things are tough. It's more like I am the mess and I'm the problem, or I'm the failure, I'm the defect. So that's really just been a part of my identity and a part of who I am really for as long as I can remember. So when I started dating, as I got a little bit older, one might think that I would go for happy-go-lucky guys that might cheer me up or something like that. But I did not. That was not the case at all. And I actually ended up marrying somebody whose experience with depression was really quite similar to my own, very persistent and very profound. So when you take the two of us together, I often say that 75% to 90% of the time that we've been together over the last 20 years of our relationship has been somewhere between a bit unhappy to extremely miserable. So that means that one or both of us have been struggling with depression a huge amount of the time. And if just one of us is struggling, you can imagine that the other one is usually not doing so great either. So I share this because the struggle of depression is really in my bones. I really truly know it from a very deep place inside of me. And as a result, I have dedicated my life to figuring out a better way. I've just always believed that there must be a better way. So I actually constructed this little figure from my miniature collection because I have an extensive miniature collection. I'm a play therapist and a sand tray therapist. And I took this little happy face guy and I taped onto his hand a little mace. If you know what a mace is, it's like a medieval weapon. It's a club with spikes. I placed him on the desk in my very first office as a social worker, and I called him the Sunshine Warrior. And he sort of became my mascot, and he's traveled around with me through the years. And I see myself to be a Sunshine Warrior because I really believe that happiness is the only thing worth fighting for. I truly think that we are meant to be here because we're meant to be enjoying our life. We're not always meant to be happy. That's not quite accurate. But when you spend so much time feeling so down, I do truly think that there are other options available. And I really have made it my life's work to figure out what those other options are for myself and, of course, for my husband. And it's exciting to be sharing them with you now. So through the years, I've always been able to hold hope. And it was easy as a teenager, even though I felt really bad, to be able to look towards the future and say, oh, this is just temporary. I'm going to grow up. I'll start my real life, and I won't always feel this way. And then when I was in my 20s, some cool things happened. I met my now husband, and I started working in the field of social work that I loved, and I had a good job that I really enjoyed, clients that I loved, but I still felt bad a lot of the time. I remember in my 20s when I was dating my husband, and we would spend a lot of weekends, sleeping in really late and just sort of generally not being so happy. But even then, it sort of felt like, oh, well, we're young adults and this is a new transition into our real life. And so this won't last forever. And of course, it'll get better. And I still held hope. And then I hit my 30s and it still felt like, okay, we're just settling into life. Now we're married. I became a mom when I was 31. And I said, okay, this has got to get better. And for me, in truth, I'll talk about much more on another episode, I'm sure. Once I had my son, things did improve in a significant way as far as the depth of my depression, I would say, and a slight change to the frequency, meaning that I felt not quite as deeply depressed a little bit less of the time, but sort of that everlasting, that almost always present feeling of downness was often there still, even after I had my son. So I just kind of kept doing what I was supposed to be doing, or what I thought I was supposed to be doing, and being a mom and being a wife and having my job. And I started my private practice, which I also really loved. And I kept plowing along and still holding all this hope that things would get better. And then I hit 40, which happened to coincide with the start of the pandemic. And all of a sudden, everything felt super hard. And again, I can talk about those details a little bit more another time. But I really got to a place just shortly after my 40th birthday where I was really questioning, is it going to be like this forever? Does it have to be like this forever? Is it inevitable? Am I going to suffer for the rest of my life so much? I just didn't think so. I just didn't think that that was the answer. I didn't think that that could possibly be the answer. So I was at a new place in my life, that my practice was established. My husband was at a pretty stable place. My son was a little bit older. My daughter, she was still new. I had a 1-year-old when I was 40. But, I was settling in. She wasn't a newborn, and we were home a lot in the pandemic, as was the rest of the world. And I took the opportunity to really dive into some pretty deep self-care in a way that I'd only been able to slightly and inconsistently reach before that. Consistency is not really my thing. It's kind of hard. I'm always striving to be consistent, but not always succeeding. But the pandemic actually gave me a little bit of space, even though my practice was really busy and I had my 1-year-old and my son was being homeschooled and my husband was working from home like many of us. But it gave me a little bit of time to focus on myself because the social calendar cleared up a little bit and some of the to-dos, like going to the grocery store, changed and things took up less time. So I really started to take care of myself in this brand new way. And after years, it became of trying to figure out how to take care of myself in this new way and loving myself and feeling more deserving of love and happiness, I kind of got to a place where I said, struggle is so last year. I'm just over this. And so I really embraced that sort of as a mantra, that struggle was so last year. And I really dedicated myself to this inner work that I've really been on this journey forever. I started therapy when I was 11 years old, and I've been in and out of therapy with wonderful therapists over the years. But something shifted in me after I hit 40, and this past year, a lot shifted for me, and I was just able to access things in a different way. And things started feeling better more of the time. And it felt like I was able to make more conscious choices, meaning that I was able to really choose, okay, if I'm having a hard day or a hard moment, what are some options that I have that might help? And I started being able to do them more consistently. And I started feeling significantly better from a more grounded place a lot more of the time. So as I started to put these puzzle pieces together and had this clearer picture of myself and my relationship and my life and my practice and my work, I really felt obligated to start sharing that and all that I was learning. And as I was getting more and more clear on myself, I was talking to my husband one day and I said, it really occurred to me the other day that my specialty as a couples therapist is working with couples where one or both people are depressed. And my husband just kindly laughed at me and was like, of course, we've lived this our entire lives. And so I was like, oh, wow, I think I'm onto something. At first, it just started to be an idea of niching down my practice, that I'm going to revamp my website and really advertise myself and kind of speak to people who are dealing with depression and living with depression so that they know that this is what I do. And then all of a sudden, it was a lot of really good momentum. Things just started coming together and one idea after another. And then all of a sudden I had this idea and this realization maybe that I actually needed to start a podcast. And the name When Depression Is in Your Bed came to me, and I realized that this is something that I really had to do. And so I started figuring out how to do it. So as I share the idea that struggle is so last year, I just want to say really clearly that I know struggle exists. To suffer is to be human, and there are huge, oppressive, often suffocating struggles that exist in our world. There's people who are hungry, without shelter. There is war and human trafficking and child abuse and assault. And we live in a country, I'm in the US, a major political divide, but in the larger world, there's so much division. And then there's all the isms, racism and sexism and ageism and ableism and classism and colonialism. And there's homophobia and transphobia and fat phobia. There's gender inequality and so much more. And that is a lot of struggle. I'm totally aware that that all exists. And when I say struggle is so last year, while I would love to have all of those things be over and done with, I know that they're real, and I know that there's a lot of work for us to do as a society and as a world. So when I say that for me, struggle is so last year, I got to a place where I really just decided that a life where I felt so stuck and overwhelmed and depressed and not good enough so much of the time just wasn't okay for me, which sounds fairly obvious, I guess, as I say it, but I really made a commitment to myself that I was going to figure out a way to feel better and to deal with these challenges in a better way, because I deserve it. Because I deserve to live a life where I can enjoy what I have built, where I can enjoy my kids who are amazing more of the time, where I can enjoy my relationship with my husband who, just like me, is imperfect, where I can do good work in this world that I enjoy. And work has always sort of been a little bit of a safe place for me. Like, I feel much more of the time I feel like myself when I'm in the office, which is really lovely. But I knew that I could do more, help more people, reach more people, speak more clearly, saying what I needed to say so that the people who really identified with me would hear it. And so while there's so much struggle in this world, and I am fully aware of that, I really do believe that starting with yourself is a worthy place to begin. And if you can do larger work on these larger social issues, that's also fantastic. I just know that for me personally, I was so consumed with myself, my relationship, making it through each day, just getting by so much of the time, sort of like the bare minimum, that I didn't really have a lot of attention or energy for things that were really important to me. I became a social worker because I believe in doing social work and I believe in social justice. And I didn't have energy or attention for a lot of those things. But now I'm starting to sort of open that up and have more availability for things that are important to me. And so as I got to that place, I really wanted to share it with others. Now, I also want to just take a moment to acknowledge that I come from a very particular perspective because of who I am, my own experiences, my own feelings, my own thoughts, my own interpretations, which are unique in some ways, and in other ways, maybe they're similar to things that you've experienced, maybe they're different. But my lens is also shaped by a lot of my identities. I am middle class, I am white, I'm non-disabled, I'm a cisgender woman who has been in a monogamous heterosexual relationship for over 20 years. I have degrees from college and graduate school. I'm the mom of 2 biological kids. I'm a business owner, I'm a homeowner, and I have many other identities, but those are some of the big ones. And I'm aware that those identities, for the most part, put me in a pretty privileged position. And I believe that my place of privilege does give me the ability to say that, hey, my struggle, it's so last year, I'm over it. Because I have all of this privilege and I have these things that allow me to even focus on my inner life in a way that is meaningful, that I have time and access to money to pay for some self-care. Not a lot of my deepest self-care, I would say, is actually not paid for. It's largely free, but I certainly have access to things that feel nice and luxuries that not everyone has access to. So I want to name my identities and I want to name the lens that I look through. And even with all my privilege and access, I also have a very deep belief that growth and healing and finding a better way, connecting in a way that feels good, at least a lot more of the time, is truly available for everyone. And so that's part of what I want to do here as a sunshine warrior of sorts. I'd like to be able to share this message in hopes that the people who really need to hear it will. And if you're somebody who is here because you need to hear this message, I'm so grateful that you're here with me today. And these things that contribute to who I am, the identities that I have, the experiences that I've been through, I also want to take a moment to share that coming from this place, coming from who I am, my intention is always to come from a place of empathy and trying to be supportive and helpful. I never want to do any harm. And yet I am human and I certainly make mistakes. So in this first episode, I want to put it out there that if I say something to you that lands as an ouch, something that feels like a hurt in some way, or if I say something as a generalization by accident and it's very different than your experience, I invite you to please let me know. I am open to your feedback. I want to hear from you. I want to learn from you. I want to expand who I am. So I have an open door policy. Please use it. You can email me or direct message me. You can comment on the podcast. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook. I'm a lot of places, but I really appreciate having the opportunity to hear from you, because learning from others who have different experiences than me is how I learn and grow and expand and become a more complete and whole version of myself, better able to connect with the world. So I thank you for feedback, and I really truly invite you to share, and I hope that I can create enough safety that you're able to come forward if there's things that you want to say to me. But the invitation, if I don't always say it, the invitation for feedback is ever present. And of course, if you have positive things that you want to share, if you have things that you relate to and you want to let me know about those things, I am of course very open to that as well. So as I begin to wrap up my first episode of this podcast, I want to share that if you are somebody like me, and you've seen a lot of dark days and you often carry a heavy weight around with you, then I hope that you are willing and open to join me on this journey so that we can find room for more joy and more fun and more connection both to your inner self and also to your partner and to your family, your friends, and the world in general, the larger world. And if you're not very much like me, if maybe you come from a very different place and a very different set of experiences, but you're here with me today and you found yourself here listening to me, if that's who you are and it makes sense for you to join this community, then I welcome you and I invite you to be here with me as well. And I hope that we can uplift each other and grow and learn together. And I really look forward to seeing what unfolds on this journey. I'm really excited about it. And as I've said a few times already, I know that suffering is human. And I know that we can't avoid it. And actually, we can find a lot more happiness if we can accept it and acknowledge and sit with our hard feelings. But you don't have to struggle so much, so often, and feel helpless and powerless. And you definitely don't have to struggle alone. So thanks for showing up today. As our time comes to a close, and as you continue to travel along on your own unique wellness journey, I leave you with an invitation. To move from where you are today to where you want to be, the path may seem long or daunting or unclear. And I want you to know that that is totally okay. You do not have to create the whole way all at once. My invitation to you today is to take a step. Just one. Any type, any size, in any direction. It can be an external step that you can be observed or measured, or it could be a step you visualize. Whatever makes sense to you. I invite you to take a step because healing, growth, connection, and joy is possible for everyone, including you, even when depression is in your bed. If you connected with today's episode, please subscribe so you can be notified when each weekly episode gets released. I encourage you to leave a review. Your feedback will help guide future episodes. And please share this podcast with anyone who you think may be interested or enjoy what I have to share. Until the next time we connect, take care of yourself and take a step.